4 reasons the scapegoat child is stronger than their narcissistic parent. Have you heard that the scapegoat child is often the healthiest member of the narcissistic family, but never known why? Do you find this idea hard to believe? And do you wonder how can someone be strong while feeling weak? To those who know scapegoat survivors and the narcissistic parent they survived, it's clear that the survivor is psychologically stronger than the parent. And this is often news to this scapegoated person. They have had to get used to seeing themselves as deficient and defective in relation to their parent. So when, for example, a therapist tells a survivor, a scapegoat survivor, that they were in fact stronger, it can seem like hearing something that they've secretly known all their lives. At the same time, they may be very skeptical of this information. They might ask, how could I have been stronger if I had to tiptoe around a parent who seemed to always be calling all the shots? Well, in this case, the definition of strength is something one can possess even while feeling weak. Well, I recently saw this form of strength in the book and TV series called The Handmaid's Tale. It's a story about a dystopian religious state where women's fertility rates have plummeted. And those women who are capable of bearing children, called the handmaids, are forced to become slaves to the ruling class families where they must conceive and bear the husband's children under the watch of the family's wife. The main character is a handmaid named June, who lives with a family where the wife immediately hates her for being able to bear children while she, the wife, cannot. The wife goes out of her way to devalue and control June. If we understand this wife as being pathologically narcissistic, then she's using June as her scapegoat. Yet to anyone who has watched the show or read the book, it's apparent that June is psychologically stronger than the wife. She was not stronger because she prevented the wife from abusing her. She demonstrated her strength in how she found a way to survive the abuse. And I want to add, as part of today's video, it's importantly, that strength would exist whether she had been abused or not. In today's video, I explain why being more powerful does not mean being stronger. Next, I offer 4 reasons why the scapegoat child is psychologically stronger than the narcissistic parent. The scapegoat child is more psychologically flexible. They are more emotionally mature. The truth matters more to them, and they are more empathic. By the end of the video, my hope is that you have a framework with which to identify how you exhibited strength both in your own upbringing and in your life today. Well, my name is Jay Reed, and I'm a licensed psychotherapist in California, and I specialize in recovery from narcissistic abuse. In my professional and personal experience, I've worked to identify the fundamentals to the process of recovery. And this has led me to what I call the 3 pillars of recovery. Pillar number 1 is making sense of what happened, to know that it was not your fault. Pillar number 2 is moving away from narcissistic abusers and towards safe people. And pillar number 3 is living in defiance of the narcissist rules. I think it's also essential to find and participate in communities of people who can get, validate, and support you on this path. I've both seen and experienced large improvements in quality of life after applying these pillars. And I also want to mention that I'm offering a new free ebook called 4 Ways to Heal for Adult Scapegoat Survivors. And in it, I offer 4 strategies to reclaim your authentic self from the fake and painful scapegoat identity, learn and apply the science behind gaining distance from narcissistic abusers, know the secret to reducing social anxiety for scapegoat survivors, and a way to accept yourself as the fallible and valuable person you are. And you can find the link to the book in the description box below. I also want to mention that I'm starting an 8-person online clinical consultation group for licensed mental health professionals who treat survivors of narcissistic abuse. And if you qualify and are interested, the link will also be in the description box below. Being more powerful does not equal strength. A narcissistic parent often wants the scapegoat child to feel weaker than them. If the parent feels a core sense of weakness, then inducing weakness in the child can relocate this troublesome feeling for the parent. By seeing the scapegoat child as the weak one, the parent feels buffered from this experience. And in order to do this, they will devalue, deprive, and control the child. The scapegoat child only knows a life where their choices are not their own. They're left in a world of fear and undeservedness. They're coerced to feel as though they are less than the narcissistic parent. The child in this position would be in disbelief if you told them that they were actually stronger than their parent. It is hard to believe you are stronger than the person who has a figurative boot on your neck. Here is why it is in fact true. Just because someone is in a position of power over another does not make them stronger. A narcissistic parent is in a position of power over their scapegoat child by sheer fortune. They have not won this position by psychological merit. They simply gave birth to a child who needs them more than they need that child to survive. So as such, it is entirely possible for the person in power to be psychologically weaker than the child or the person not in power. In fact, their weakness may get expressed by exerting power over the child. Well, if psychological strength does not equal power over others, then what does it mean? Here are 4 traits that reflect true psychological strength. I see these traits show up time and again in my clinical work with scapegoat survivors. In fact, these traits seem to help them endure the pain of childhood and find ways to heal from it. Strength number 1, flexibility. The scapegoat child is inherently psychologically flexible. They can take others' perspectives. If the demands of the situation call for it, they can also go along with the other's perspective. This trait is required to stay in the narcissistic parent's reality. The narcissistic parent's perspective is distorted by their need to deny their own feelings of low self-worth. The scapegoat child has to psychologically stretch themselves to live in the parent's perspective. Flexibility often gets mistaken for not having a backbone. Scapegoat survivors may criticize themselves for supposedly bending to the narcissistic parent's will. This view does not include the fact that survival meant finding a way to share in the parent's reality. Their psychological flexibility allowed them to do just this. And not everyone possesses such psychological flexibility. The narcissistic parent, for example, demonstrates extreme rigidity in their perspective. They must guard their inflated yet fragile self-worth so that they can only hold perspectives that conform to that exaggeration. A scapegoat child learns that the narcissistic parent will take everything personally. Whatever happens around the parent will be seen as a referendum on the parent's worthiness. The narcissistic parent is unable to consider other perspectives. Their psychology has formed too rigidly to defend themselves from threatening information. Let's look at another anonymized case example to illustrate. Lawrence found himself able to relate to a wide variety of people. In high school, he worked at a car wash with coworkers who were often 20 years older. On his basketball team, he got along with his teammates. He also found ways to connect with his teachers. It seemed easy to him to pay attention to someone and figure out where they were coming from. He could meet them where they figuratively stood with little effort. Lawrence also had a wrathful, narcissistic father who cast all of Lawrence's traits in a negative light. When Lawrence got home from work and was sharing a good experience he had had with his coworkers, his father's response was often something like, "Boy, you know just what to say to get people to like you, don't you? I bet they don't even realize what you're doing to them." Well, Lawrence felt a surge of shame as he suddenly found himself feeling like a bad and manipulative guy. His father must have been seeing something that was as plain as day. Lawrence could not even trust himself to realize how bad and deceitful he really was, or so he thought. In this example, Lawrence's strength of flexibility seemed to threaten his narcissistic father. To nullify the threat, his father distorted Lawrence's strength into a supposed character defect of being manipulative and deceitful. Strength number 2, emotional maturity. The scapegoat child demonstrates significantly more emotional maturity than the narcissistic parent. They have the ability to be informed by, but not dominated by their emotions. I suggest that they are able to do this because of their unusually high capacity to introspect. The scapegoat child is on their own to navigate their feelings. The narcissistic parent casts this child as an adversary to them and the family. This leaves the child without anyone to express and regulate their strong emotions with. This is typically how a child would learn to modulate such strong emotions. Yet somehow the scapegoat child figures out a way to do this on their own. The scapegoat survivors that I have had the privilege to work with are phenomenally introspective and often use this to manage their feelings on their own. The scapegoat child may be endowed with an unusually high capacity for introspection. Introspection, or looking within, requires the ability to be curious about what one is feeling. The scapegoat child who engages in introspection is trying to figure out what their feelings and others' feelings mean in a current context. They take their feelings as suggestions rather than facts about what is going on around them. It's probably obvious that a narcissistic parent is emotionally immature. They are dominated by their emotions. They see their feelings as facts and navigate the world accordingly. For example, let's say that the scapegoat child demonstrates an ability that the parent covets, which leads the parent feeling envy-based shame. The parent feels pain in relation to the child, therefore the child must be bad. The parent does not have the capacity to introspect and wonder why they feel such intense shame in observing their child's abilities. Well, let's go back to the case of Lawrence to illustrate further. He mostly kept a level head in his life. When his friends lost their temper on the basketball court, Lawrence was the one who would step in and get them to calm down. He was selected by his school counselor to be part of a student leadership committee. His father could not stand to see Lawrence's emotional stability. Whenever his father was in a full rage and Lawrence was speaking to him calmly, his father grew even more furious. He hated that Lawrence was in control of himself more than he was. He would take away Lawrence's freedoms until he got to the one that Lawrence really cared about. At that point, Lawrence would pound his fist on the counter or sink to his knees in despair. Then his father would exclaim, almost proudly, "Look who's throwing a tantrum." Lawrence possessed a great deal of emotional maturity. However, his father's efforts to flood him with despair, then accuse him of being emotionally immature, confused Lawrence. He wondered how he could be so calm and collected at school, but have such tantrums at home. It couldn't occur to him at the time that his father was goading him. He had to conclude that instead he was really the emotionally immature person his father claimed he was, and that Lawrence's calmness at school was just a supposed act. Strength number 3, driven towards the truth. The truth matters a great deal to the scapegoat child and the scapegoat survivor. Though they have had to go along with their narcissistic parents' distorted reality, they often are bothered at a deep level that it's not true. The scapegoat child's psychology is oriented to knowing what is real. They are bothered by living in denial. During childhood, survival demands they suppress their need to know what is true. Once enough distance has been obtained from their narcissistically abusive parent, they can begin to safely seek truth. This means prizing information that is accurate, regardless of how it makes one or the people around them feel. Knowing what is true for the scapegoat survivor scratches a fundamental itch. Even if the truth brings challenges, the survivor prefers it over a kind of quasi-easy existence that's full of falsities. I see this propensity towards the truth every day in my practice. Scapegoat survivors are motivated to come to therapy to be able to live in unison with the truth. They have been pained by having to live at odds with it to keep their narcissistic parent gratified. The truth they have survived, though, is too overwhelming to know on their own. To paraphrase an important psychoanalytic theorist named Wilfred Bion, we cannot think some thoughts without another person. The thought that a parent cannot offer the love that was needed fits this category for the scapegoat child. And yet the scapegoat survivors I work with are driven to know what actually happened in their childhood. Therapy affords that other person needed to think and know what happened for the survivor. The reward over time is that the survivor gets to satisfy their drive to know the truth. The drive towards truth may explain why scapegoat survivors come to therapy so much more often than pathological narcissists. In contrast to the scapegoat survivor, the narcissistic parent can live in denial of who they actually are and what they actually did in the scapegoat survivor's childhood. They may be incapable of tolerating the shame they would feel if they too sought the truth. They prioritize feeling good over knowing reality. I'll submit that they don't possess the psychological strength to do otherwise. So let's go again back to Lawrence to illustrate. He sought therapy in his mid-20s and began to tell his therapist about his upbringing. His therapist told him that his father's behavior towards him was abusive. This confirmed something that Lawrence always knew. He thought back to all the times he would argue with his father that he was being unfair to Lawrence, but to no avail. Lawrence thought the truth was that he should not be grounded for a month, for example, for leaving a piece of clothing on his bedroom floor. Yet his father refused to acknowledge any basis for what Lawrence claimed was the truth. Well, after about 6 months of therapy, Lawrence returned home for a holiday. He was brimming with excitement to tell his father how devalued he felt as his son. He was ready to recount his father's abusive treatment and expected to be met with a sincere apology. Instead, he was shocked to find that his father flatly denied all of Lawrence's memories. He told him, "Boy, you really know how to bend the truth to your advantage, don't you? Get out of here with these lies, Lawrence. I raised you right, and if you think different, then that's your problem, not mine." Lawrence's concern with setting the record straight about the past with his father reflected his drive towards the truth. His father showed his willingness to deny the truth in order to avoid feeling bad by dismissing Lawrence's claims. Strength number 4, empathy. The scapegoat child has the ability to perceive and care about the feelings of others. This is so despite receiving very little of the same from their narcissistic parent. Similar to flexibility, a scapegoat survivor may wonder why empathy is a strength. They may see their empathy for the narcissistic parent as what led to being so exploited. I think this view loses sight of the fact that the child's survival depended on meeting the narcissistic parent's emotional demands. The scapegoat child who could empathically understand their narcissistic parent's vulnerability to feeling worthless stood a better chance at surviving. This understanding allowed the child to avoid actions that would be perceived as offensive by their parent. Outside of the context of the narcissistic parent, empathy is indeed a strength. Being able to attune to and care about the feelings of someone else leads to healthy relationships. Healthy people are drawn to being understood and having their feelings matter to someone else. The scapegoat child and survivor's capacity for this often leads to being quite popular with healthy people outside the family. The narcissistic parent is bereft of this strength. Their lack of empathy may be what makes it possible to abuse their child without concern for the impacts on that child. They navigate life by seeing who can add to or subtract from their exaggerated self-worth. There's a glaring incapacity to care about the inner worlds of these other people. As a result, pathologically narcissistic people are unable to sustain reciprocal relationships. This can lead to a pattern of broken and/or unsatisfying relationships. Let's go again back to Lawrence. He was acutely aware of his father's feelings in any given moment. He could predict what types of circumstances would lead to his father feeling slighted and therefore hostile. He would use his empathic awareness of his father's feelings to try to prevent explosions of rage as much as Lawrence could. For example, Lawrence knew that his father would feel like he didn't matter if Lawrence asked for his permission to join some friends at a party. So Lawrence would be sure to tell his father how much he appreciated him in the days leading up to the party. Then, on the day of, Lawrence would nonchalantly say that someone had invited him to a party, and though he didn't really want to go, he didn't want to disappoint this friend. Then he would ask his father what he thought he should do. And often his father would say something like, "Well, just go to the party. What do I care?" Lawrence was able to employ his empathy to keep himself safe as much as possible from his father's temper and find a way to get moments of freedom where possible. He bought himself experiences of socialization that were so important for his development. Knowing that he had a way to get his father's permission to see his friends also gave him hope that would sustain him throughout his adolescence. Well, once Lawrence had moved away from his family, he was surprised to find how empathic people found him. His girlfriend at one point told him that she really appreciates how he listens to her and easily understands how she's feeling. Lawrence expected her to see this as something he was up to, or that he was just saying the right thing, like his dad would accuse him of so often. But she meant this in a wholly positive way about Lawrence. Well, as he continued in therapy, he got to see how his ability to empathize with others was actually highly valued by them. Give yourself the credit you are due. There's a particularly unfair aspect to the narcissistic parent's treatment of the scapegoat child. The parent is only able to offload their own sense of worthlessness onto the child because the child is psychologically strong enough to bear it. So the parent profits from the child's strength, yet will not credit the child for it in any way. This is exquisitely unfair to the scapegoat child because such credit might at least give them something they could rightfully value in themselves. They might get to see and know themselves as psychologically strong. In essence, they are deprived of the kind of speech that George Clooney gives to his son in the movie Michael Clayton. Let's take a look.
Hey, hey. How you doing, Henry?
Henry, get in the car.
Good to see you, Hen.
What do you want?
I've been sober 8 days now. Been back at the meetings. Wanted you to know.
In front of the kid?
Mickey, please. I know how bad I did, I swear. I don't know how to make it right again. It's all I think about. What do I do? I don't know what to do.
Get Stephanie your tires back.
Is he crying? Because of drugs, right?
That and everything else.
What?
Timmy, and I mean this, on his best day, he was never as tough as you. I'm not talking about crying at the drugs or anything. I'm talking about in his heart, in his heart. You understand me? And all this charming bullshit, this Big Tim Uncle Boss bullshit. And I know you love him, and I know why. But when you see him like that, you don't have to worry because that's not how it's going to be for you. You're not going to be one of these people that goes through life wondering why shit keeps falling out of the sky on you. I know that. I know it. Okay? I see it every time I look at you. I see it right now. I don't know where you got it from, but you got it. Okay?
I just think that's such a great example cinematically of a parent recognizing the strength in their child. As unfair as the omission of credit for your strength was in childhood, it's not too late to grant it to yourself today. I think that this can be one of the important outcomes from therapy. By working with someone who can see your strengths, those strengths get to be something you know exists in the world. Well, I hope you found today's video helpful. If you're a scapegoat survivor and have had to sort of labor under this idea that you were not strong, I really hope that reflecting on these four qualities of strength, and or if you have some of your own to think about, equally valid. But I think it's really important to sort of maybe even reprogram one's understanding of what constitutes strength in this kind of narcissistic parent scapegoat child arrangement. And I don't mean it to just look through rose-tinted glasses. I really think that this is kind of the most accurate description of what went on. But with that, I want to again thank everyone for your continued support, engagement, interest in this channel and the resources around it. And as always, welcome your comments, and really again am heartened to see the comments each week and people's sharing their stories, connecting to the stories of others, and kind of building on one another a lot of times, it seems. So from Brizo back there and myself, we look forward to posting again next Friday. Take care.